Yay, we're good. All right. Oh, good. Folks are starting to arrive. It's always fun with Zoom seminars to watch people arrive as numbers go up. Can't see all of you, but we're glad you're here and coming. And for our first seminar of 2022, as everybody's coming in and getting settled in place and such, we thought we would just ask if you'd like to tell us where you're joining us from and perhaps what city park where you live, either wherever you are or here in Eugene. What city park have you visited recently? Let's go ahead and put that in the chat. Like we've got folks from all over Eugene and visiting our parks in the winter, which of course is always fun. You don't typically think of asking, what park have you gone to in the winter? But here in Eugene, we had people skiing in the park near my house a couple or 3 weeks ago. So yeah, if you'd all just kind of like to let us know about a park near you, we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Juliet.
I'm not sure why I'm here as a panelist, but
yeah. Well, welcome. We'll start in just a couple of minutes. Some of you may have noticed that in the chat, we have folks telling us where they're from and what park they might have visited recently. Perhaps some of you live near a park that was good for sledding. Well, welcome to everyone who's coming for the first Lane County Master Gardener Association seminar for 2022. Today, we're going to learn more about the Downtown Riverfront Park, and I'm sure most of us have seen it as we've been over the Ferry Street Bridge or driving along that area. And Emily Proudfoot is our speaker tonight. She's the landscape architect for the City of Eugene Parks, position that she's held for 20 years. She has a Bachelor of Landscape Architecture degree from the University of Oregon and leads a team of 4 design professionals, manages the City Parks and Open Space Capital campaign, and is a member of the city's Public Art Committee. So she's going to tell us about the Downtown Riverfront Park project, which is part of what will eventually be a brand new neighborhood in that area. She's going to focus tonight on the planting design, the use of native plants in the project, and how the city's design team has responded to, of course, code and engineering requirements for planting throughout the project. Let me remind everyone that we will have time for questions at the end. And if you would put your questions in the Q&A, Jan Gano will be keeping an eye on that and managing the questions at the end of the seminar. But we're much more likely to find your question if you put it in the Q&A. So thank you, Emily, and it's all yours.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. I see there's 49 participants now, which is a lot of people. It's great to have so many people here virtually to hear about this incredible project. So also it's been really fun to see all the projects that you all and parks that you visited in our community. Pre-pandemic, we did some studies around park visitation and basically calculated that our park system at that time, so this is pre-pandemic, pre-COVID, we would have 9 million park visits a year. So if I went running in the park twice a week, that would be 2 visits. But in the meantime, I think our park visitation has probably increased double, just because so many people have been elected to go outside to get their exercise and just save their brains from becoming COVID brains. So I'm excited to be here today to talk about a project that we've been able to construct through the pandemic. It's a huge lift for our city, and I'm going to share my screen here so we can get the slideshow started. Let's see. Actually, let's take a quick minute. Bear with me here. All right. Let's try this again. All right. Okay. I do have a slideshow. Here we go. Share. And then can everyone see that? Can someone say yes or no?
Yes, it looks just
How's
fine.
that look? Looks
It
good?
looks great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. Sure. Thanks for letting me know. So here we are, the beginning slide with a beautiful lupin on the riverbank. And I will, tonight I'm going to tell you about a little bit of the history of how this project came to be, sort of its bigger context on the downtown riverfront, and then maybe some more design details about, I'm definitely going to talk a little bit about artwork, but then also the planting design, because I think it's of specific interest to this group. So here we go. Let's give this a try. All right. So this is a diagrammatic map of the Downtown Riverfront Park project. So it stretches all the way from the north, sort of north here at the Peter DeFazio Bridge, all the way south to the connection of Hilliard to the Ruth Bascom Path here at the south, and the connection to the University of Oregon North Campus property, the path there. And it was just recently renovated, so maybe you've been on that path lately. Just for reference, these are the EWEB headquarters. Can you see my cursor? I'll assume so. So EWEB headquarters,
we can.
You can. Good. Okay, EWEB headquarters here in the middle with the existing EWEB Plaza. And so north of there, we built a new connection up to the top of the DeFazio Bridge to make it easier to get from this area of the riverfront up to the DeFazio Bridge. And then, and you'll see some photos of this, but we really did a lot of re-landscaping in this area to make it much more of a formal entrance to the north entrance to the Downtown Riverfront Park. And then this here is Fifth Avenue, the extension of Fifth Avenue. And the bike path then veers away from the riverbank a little and arcs all the way down here past the steam plant and the electrical substation that EWEB still owns. This is a 3.5 acre project. And phase one of the project is just this area to the riverside of the bike path. This area here is a future 1 acre plaza, and we received $5 million from the state this year to construct that. And we're looking forward to constructing that in 2024. So for now, it's just green lawn. The overall project site outside of the 3.5 acre park site is a 17 acre redevelopment site. So you're going to see development of market rate apartments and some probably row houses with retail on the bottom. This site here is a restaurant site. So the idea is you'll have a beer on the river eventually. And then this is the steam plant, which will also be redeveloped, I think, into food service, a boutique hotel, and working offices. So the center part of the park project is where we laid the bank back quite a bit. So we made the grade of the bank a lot less steep, and then installed 3 overlooks here at 5th Avenue, a deck overlook here at Wiley Griffin Way, which is a new street, and then at Neck Neck Avenue here, which is Calapooya for Duck, we have the south overlook. So a little bit of history about the downtown riverfront, which is that the park and riverfront redevelopment has been envisioned for decades in many downtown plans and many iterations of visions for a future of downtown where we come back to the river. And so it was the site of a former EWEB Operations. So EWEB's operations moved west to the Roosevelt Operations Center in about 2010. And at that time, there was a master plan developed for this site that envisioned a park and then mixed use development, and which included retail and restaurants and lots of green space. Since that time, the plan has changed a little bit, but the mainstay of the project has always been this 3.5 acre riverfront park. And this picture on the right here is of walls being constructed for the deck overlook, which you'll see later on in the slideshow. So this is a series of pictures of what's been happening on the site since 2018. So the city bought the property in late 2017 or early 2018 from EWEB. And at the time, it still had some big buildings on it and lots of asphalt paving. In 2019, early 2019, all of the buildings were raised off of the site. And then we embarked upon a huge earth moving project in which we moved the top of the bank back. We relocated utilities and we graded the site so that it would be start to be ready for roads and utilities. And then in 2020, we started working on all of the streets and utilities and roads, and then started in earnest on the construction of the Downtown Riverfront Park. So this is you can see the footings for the deck and the overlooks for 5th Street here, and that sort of big lens shape. Then in 2021, over the summer of 2021, we almost completed the project. And so this is a picture probably in the fall before we seeded this lawn area here, before we'd had a chance to fully plant the riverbank. But now there's a lot more green on the site, but you can see this deck overlook here, the 5th Avenue overlook, and it's really starting to take shape. So it's a very quick progression over a relatively short period of time, and an extraordinary amount of work, because what we were actually planning for was to have a park on the riverfront by 2021 in time for the World Games. So a pandemic is never a good thing, but a year-long delay of a project like this can be very helpful. So with that, we are very close to realizing this vision. This is an illustration of the Downtown Riverfront Park. And when we went through several sort of public outreach sessions on what people really wanted in their riverfront park. And so we had some ideas about that from the master plan, which was, we want the river to meet the city and the city to meet the river. So lots of vegetation and stormwater, but fundamentally folks wanted an urban riverfront park. So they didn't want it so urban that was like marble and like trees in front of glass buildings. But they also didn't want it so fuzzy that it looked like a lot of our other riverfront parks in town that was just sort of predominantly green and natural and shady. They really wanted this to have more of an urban feel to it, and one where the city really comes toward the river a little bit more, at the same time as really sort of enhancing the habitat and quality of life on the river for birds and fish. And so there's a lot of these sort of conservation ethics that were also expressed throughout the design process. So I will sort of work through these slides, and you'll kind of see like a design photo, and then, oh, here's a real photo. So here's a pretty accurate photo that kind of compares this view with this view as the park is today. It's actually even more cleaned up than this. So this is a view that was put together by the development team. So the folks who are going to build all the buildings on the redevelopment side. And here you can see this Fifth Avenue overlook and this arching bike path that's split actually by stormwater treatment, which I'll talk about in a little bit. This deck, this pedestrian walk. And if you keep this electrical tower in mind or in your view, it's always a good anchor point to figure out kind of where you are located in the photograph. And then this is the steam plant over here. The project is about 1/3 of a mile of riverbank, all the way from down here, all the way up to the DeFazio Bridge. But this is a great sort of in-process shot as we, begin to pave out Fifth Street with these stormwater treatment planters. And then, the development of the park is really starting to take shape. So the small pedestrian path here, the big bike path here, the Fifth Street overlook, and the deck overlook. We also have an overlook way down there. So one of the sort of key design tenets within both the master plan and subsequently the park plan was that this idea of a cultural landscape. So a cultural landscape basically lets you know where you are in a place because it tells stories about its history. It creates experiences that, are either historic or real or current or whatever. And they do that through plantings and through art and through design and through storytelling. And so that was really a vision from the beginning for this site, as there's been a lot of history on the Downtown Riverfront site. So we have 3 different art installations that are going to be integrated into the site. The first is this steam ring here, and it interprets the steam plant, and it's meant to be a cut through of a turbine. So the way the steam plant worked is it pulled water up out of the river, and then they boiled it using a variety of different fuels. So everything from hog fuel or sawdust from our timber industry to, I think in the end it was natural gas. And then that created steam to heat downtown. The steam plant was also a backup power generation site in case folks left power, in case something went wrong with our regular power generation sources. And so this artwork is really interesting. The outside ring is a grate, and the inside ring has all the parts and pieces of the steam plant labeled. The outside ring has a little bathtub under it, and inside of there is light and mist that will come out of the grate. And so there's this sort of experiential quality to the piece that reminds you of what the steam plant actually did, that you can feel and touch and see. And this will be located in the south overlook, so just next to the steam plant. The second artwork piece that we are having fabricated is this ecology, we call it the ecology piece. So it tells the story of the braided river, and these riverine pieces are embedded in concrete throughout the site, and 5 of them come up onto these interpretive panels. And this is all being fabricated in bronze, cast in bronze here in Eugene by our local bronze artist and fabricator, Steve Reinmuth, who's very talented. And so the stories that'll be told on the top of these seats are, there's one about the spring Chinook that are unique to this stretch of the Willamette. There's one about stormwater and how we treat water now before it enters the river to keep pollutants from entering the river. There's another one about the braided river, so how we've sort of narrowed that river over time into one channel. And another one about our watershed and where the City of Eugene sits in the watershed and all the different tributaries to the Willamette. And then the last one is we're holding a panel for a story that we want to tell in collaboration with our local Native American tribes. But we've had a hard time kind of connecting around what that story should be and look like. So we're just holding space for that. This third piece interprets the Across the Bridge community. And so the Across the Bridge community was Eugene's first Black neighborhood. And it was located in Alton Baker Park, or a little bit above Alton Baker Park, maybe around where the Birch's shoe store is, just, up out of the floodway a little bit. Basically the river was formed the red line, and African-American and Black Eugenians were not allowed to live within the city limits. And so they were forced to live across the bridge. And about 5 years into that community's being, the county came and said, you have to leave this site because we're going to build the Ferry Street Bridge. And so the sense of community there was destroyed, their homes were destroyed, and they were forced to live in other areas outside of the city limits with really no services whatsoever. And so this piece it takes the shape of a multi-level drinking fountain and has a lot of photographs of Black Eugenians of the time, and it tells several stories from what it was like to be Black in Eugene at that time. And it's a difficult story, but it also conveys a message of inclusion into the future. And I think it's very poignant. It's a beautiful piece, and it has this gorgeous view across the river to Alton Baker Park. So all three of these pieces will be installed sometime this year. And I will say that we're waiting specifically for the installation of this piece to open the park, because right now there's a big hole in the ground because it goes within this extension of the overlook. And so it's not very safe to open the park yet. In the meantime, we're finishing up a lot of tiny details that I think are going to make it really successful once it opens. So here's some samples of the bronze artwork, and you can see this grate and then these words on the inside. These are samples of the interpretive panels that come up off of the river piece. The sort of iconic piece of art that we have on this site, and we did have a lot of conversations with the community about artwork, and our project artist who was on the design team, really taught people about public art and then asked them what kind of art would they like to see on their Downtown Riverfront Park. And one was iconic art, or like really big art, and the other was interpretive art. So I think we've covered a lot of those bases. This piece is called Sub Supra, and it is made of about 60 pieces of these fabricated metal ribbons. And the underside is stainless steel, and it basically takes the shape of the topography of the river immediately below it. And so you can kind of see the river channel here. It's very reflective. It's like the bean in Chicago. So you can see yourself reflected in it, and it's bendy, so you can be short or tall. But I think one of the most beautiful things is that you can see the reflection of the river running along this edge when you visit the site. So it's this beautiful gateway out to this wonderful overlook to the river, which is very expansive. It will be lit. And then it's also meant to be a space for more artistic encounters. So maybe it's sculpture, or there's a band playing, or there's a screen that's pulled down and stretched. We're showing some sort of visual art or something. But it's really, I think, kind of an icon of the place that we've created here, and it's absolutely beautiful. This third piece is a temporary piece, and I love this piece. We have so much chain link fence on site that we really wanted to potentially put out there the option for decorating the fence in some way. So we did a little call to artists, and the successful artist was Charlie Swing from Art City, who had reached out in turn to communities of color and culture to see if they wanted to do some kind of culture raising on the fence. And so the only The only group she heard from was a local indigenous group, this girl, TJ, who's 17. She took photographs of an elder and a younger and put them together as a single face across this 100 feet of fence. And it's, so this sort of oversized faces of local Native Americans. And it's just, I feel like they're kind of keeping the park safe. It looks over the river, but also I think it's just wonderful to have that presence, that cultural presence within our park setting, and you know, and that these folks can be seen within an art setting. So it's a beautiful piece, and I'm very excited to open it with the park as well. Plants. We approached planting for this site in 2 general phases. So the first phase, when we moved all of this dirt around, we also did a significant amount of habitat enhancement along the riverbanks that were not going to be changed in grade. So we did a ton of removal of non-native invasives, so blackberries and non-native shrubs and trees and like ivy and all kinds of bad things. We took those all out, grubbed them mostly out by hand, a little bit of spot spraying, because that's really was successful, and some follow-up spot spraying. And in turn, then 2 years ago now, we planted over 24,000 native plants along the bank. And so I just wanted to show you this drawing because it shows how these were planted. They were tiny little plugs or pots or bulbs or 1 gallon plants. And they're all native species. So one of the wonderful things that happened was that there were a lot of flowers in there. And so the very first spring, we had columbine and lupin and bleeding heart and fresh new ferns and just all kinds of things. You can see the list here. But in any case, it's been really successful, I think, in general. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was that this little line right here is the 25-year flood line. So it's fairly high up the bank. But in general, we had one kind of planting group here that was sort of with lots of Nootka rose clusters planted within it. So that planting group, I believe, is this one. And then we had a second type of planting up here, which is the little dots. And that was this one. And then we preserved this zone for future planting because we knew we were going to do a lot of construction up here and we didn't want to plant an area that was just going to get beat up. So in any case, this is also an opportunity for me to talk about our landscape architect, Walker Macy Landscape Architecture out of Portland. They have a very distinctive planting style and planting design style. And a lot of that is they do a lot of groupings of plants, or they create texture by picking maybe 4 plants and planting them in a very even pattern. And you'll see that throughout some more of these slides. But for reference, they also did the landscape design outside the Matthew Knight Arena on the Franklin Boulevard side of the project. And I think that has just a sort of a beautiful architectural layering within a stormwater treatment setting that is, it's really distinctive, and it really is complementary to the building. So this is a drawing of the future deck and boardwalk and this stormwater treatment planting regimes. So we have 2, as you know, in much of Eugene's development code, any paved areas have to be, the stormwater running off of those paved areas has to be treated through some sort of vegetative facility before it can leave the site. So we have 2 main areas of stormwater treatment. One is along the bike path where we split pedestrians from bicyclists. And through the middle of that, we have a series of stormwater treatment planters. And those collectively flow into this much larger one, along with drainage from other paved path areas. And this is an excellent example of kind of a blending of plants to create a pattern. And it really has seasonal interest as well. So this is a combination of these rushes and then yellow twig dogwood and then Siberian iris. And I think come springtime, this was in probably late summer. And so they were fairly freshly planted, but I think come springtime, this is just it's going to be more full. And over time, you'll probably see less of the rocks and more just sort of really interesting, diverse vegetation. And then in the spring, you'll see beautiful flowers. So it's very effective. This boardwalk runs along the edge of it. And so this downhill side is then the bank that goes down to the river, and it's been planted all in native plants as well. And from a code perspective, for the most part, all of the plants on this site are native or some sort of variant of a native plant. And that's largely because, within 100 feet of the river, we're working within a conservation zone. And so within that conservation zone, you have to plant within a certain regime you have to pick plants off the plant list, off the conservation plant list. So I feel like, Walker Macy's done a beautiful job of incorporating those plants in a way that is really almost like a paintbrush. Go to the next slide. So this is a view of this, what we call deck 2. So it's not the main deck, it's a second deck to the south of the main deck up here. And you can really start to see that sort of paintbrush aesthetic that goes through here. And if you look over here on the plan, so this is all Dischampsia, and it's some sort of variety, like golden something, I can't remember, but it's very fine and kind of misty. And then in these bands, kind of in these various bands throughout that planting, then there are other plants that get mixed in here, and some of them are hiding right now, and some of them are apparent. So there's lupin in here. There is around most of these plants in certain areas. There's camas that's planted all around the back of this section of the planter. So you're going to see these things come up seasonally, and it's mostly like blue flowers, and they're so pretty. I just can't wait to see this sort of texture and color kind of evolve through the seasons as the project grows into itself a little bit. So this is a view looking south toward the steep plant of that same kind of approach. So you can see these shrubs here are here. And then this band kind of marks some of these bands of plantings where they've interspersed other plants. So a couple of different kinds of camas, some lupin, and they're all interplanted with each other. And when they come up, it'll be really apparent and seasonally interesting. This is planting up at the north end of the site. And you can see Coburg Road right back here. This is where you drive up on 4th, and then there's that little on-ramp to the Ferry Street Bridge right there. And so this is this curvy path here, and this is all filled up with mixes of ground covers, also lupins, and then accentuated here with vine maple. And then in the big picture, we saved some really big trees, some big clusters of trees here. They're big leaf maples, and we saved those. And so these kind of serve as this lovely understory within this new path and ramp system up to the top of the bank. And again, it's all within the conservation zone. So these are all native plants or variations thereof. And so then you can see this kind of painting. So here's like a very smooth grass texture. And then here's this kind of rough texture that will have color popping out of it later. And here is this texture of these, these stormwater planters that are, there's clethra planted. There's just two things planted in there. There's a grass, and then there's this clethra shrub. And then here's that texture of the stormwater planter with the iris and the yellow twig dogwood. And then we'll have a, sort of a fourth texture here. And there's a line that comes across also where there's, different texture of plants down here than up here. And those have all been planted now. They're just very tiny. So it doesn't make us quite the strong statement yet that I think that it will, but it's all irrigated and mulched. And I think we'll have every opportunity to thrive. And so then this is maybe just a little bit more of that kind of color that you might see in the future with these separated landscape areas. And I love this drawing because it really shows kind of this two-way bikeway a pedestrian pathway that parallels the bikeway. And then there's this sort of meandering river walk that, takes you along in a much more slow fashion down along the river. And I think one of the most, impressive things about this design, and once you get there, you can really experience it, but it has, we've taken a bike path that was, on the top of the bank like this, all the way over to EWEB, and you were squished between a fence and this guardrail and a very steep bank down. And in this project, we pulled that top of bank over here, and now we have this sort of gracious acceptance of the river as it turns to the north. But then when you're on site, there's this sort of beautiful layering of experiences. So this is all one level, and then you step, you can kind of step down to this level with this beautiful pedestrian path and these overlooks. And then with the deck and the boardwalk, there's kind of this lower third level yet. And so, as you're standing down here, then you can look back up these layers of landscape and kind of the textures and shapes that are really accentuated, I think, by the planting design. And then as we, it's a really beautiful space to be within and to appreciate the river, which is the entire point of the park. So from that perspective, I just have all the kudos in the world for Walker Macy Landscape Architecture and their real vision around how this design could really achieve so many goals and visions that we had for this park. And then, lastly, I really look forward to the development of the Downtown Riverfront Plaza. I think it will add some more of that urban feel. Well, we'll have a plaza that can be programmed in lots of different ways. We'll have more trees. We'll have, and I think continue to have that kind of textured landscape that really defines space, but also, showcases a design for one of the most beautiful natural assets in our whole city. So that's what I have, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Emily. That was a great talk. I can't wait till I
Thank
get
you.
open and take my first.
I know, it's very exciting.
Yeah, run down through there. So we have a few questions. Be sure to put your questions into the Q&A and we'll give them to her. The first one's from Michael Cunningham, and his question is, are you folks going to be building more apartments over by the EWEB headquarters here in Eugene? If not, where are apartments going to be built here in town?
Yeah, so I would say that a majority of what you're going to see as part of the Downtown Riverfront development are market rate apartments. We will have some low income housing as well, and you will start to see those buildings get under construction here, I think, probably, well, sometime this spring, I think. So we have sold 3 of the lots to our development team. And those are kind of centrally, well, one of them is right across the street from the Future Plaza. And I can show slides here if it's helpful, but anyway, you're going to start seeing some building construction happening. And over the next few years, we'll sell the lots off. I believe that the lots immediately west of the park will be developing within the next 5 years. So you should see some apartments there very soon, along with a little ground level retail, which is really exciting.
Great. Next one, I have tried to access the riverfront by the North Eugene, only to be stopped by the barriers to the new paths. When will they be removed? The new plants.
Oh, yeah. So, and I'm assuming they mean the riverfront path, or are they talking about somewhere else?
Yeah.
Hang on, let me look at the question.
Yeah, it's from Gwendolyn.
Oh, by the north entrance. Yes. Okay. So once we open the park, those should be accessible. So I think, this is my best guess. We are working with, our bronze fabricator. And the reason I can't open the park is because there's a really big hole in the ground at the south overlook, plus some other areas where we need to put in-ground bronze artwork. So as soon as that in-ground artwork is installed, we can open the park. We'll continue to install other pieces of artwork that aren't critical for basically for visitor safety, but and I anticipate that will probably be in mid-April, but again, don't quote me because I've been quoted so many times and I've been wrong so many times, but it has to be done before the games. And so that will happen. And that's what I know.
Okay, great.
So.
Is there any chance of flooding? especially since,
Oh, yeah,
don't know,
yeah.
know exactly
So-
how climate change will affect the Willamette River.
Right. It's a really good question. So
Yeah.
during this process, there were, despite the landscape architecture team, they had all kinds of sub-consultants on their team. So they had civil engineers and fluvial geomorphologists and geotechnical engineers and artists and plumbers and electricians, and like all these people really figuring out a lot of these really technical details. And so the most interesting, modeling, of course, comes from the fluvial geomorphologists, who are the folks who really study the river. They understand how the river works. They understand the engineering of the river and like how it flows and like how high water is and what the impact of that is, et cetera. So in looking at the modeling, basically, a 100-year flood will not reach the top of that bank. It will come up the bank and the bank will hold, because we have a lot of special, armoring and anchoring with jute matting and rocks and plants and special dirt to kind of hold that bank all together when we get high water. But what I saw was that that the Downtown Riverfront Park will not flood. Instead, if we were to have, say, a 500-year flood, which is a big deal, but it would flow out under the sky bridge between the two EWEB headquarters buildings, and that's how it would get downtown. So this bank has been really built up over time and has been well out of any flooding for hundreds of years. Before it got all built up, and before white settlers came, the river would braid through town all the time, and indigenous tribes here would live with the river, live with the land, and understood that that's how it worked. And white settlers are more afraid of that, and they're more interested in controlling the land. So now we have a park that the elevation is unlikely to see flooding in the future. So,
What happened to the mill race?
Oh, the mill race. So the mill race is, it's still in a pipe under the development. And one of the reasons, there's been a long held visions of daylighting the mill race in town and making this gorgeous canal. And part of the problem with that vision is that, the ground is up here and the water is way down here. So we'd have to, pump it up to create this beautiful canal kind of, water feature through downtown. So as it is, it comes out of the site in this 52-inch pipe, and blue herons wait there for fish, and ducks swim there, and it's very visible from some of the overlooks in the park. And we really weren't able to daylight it. I do think we may end up maybe referencing it in some way in the plaza, but I'm not sure. So in any case, it's still in a 58-inch pipe underground, but all of the stormwater from the park filters through these beautiful plant beds and then connects to that pipe. So that's where it is.
Okay, great. So Valerie says it looks great. Will there be benches for folks to sit on? They would be much appreciated, especially by
Yes. Lots of benches. So we have benches all along the main bike path. And then as you sort of move lower into the site, there are these shade structures at the deck areas, which have beautiful benches to sit on. There's this big, beautiful lounge bench overlooking the river as well, near that big deck overlook. So lots of seating. And then we'll also have, let's see. Oh, it's just some floating cafe tables and chairs that, we'll tie them up at night, but those will also be available in a couple of different areas in the park.
Great. There seems to be a lot of trees between the walkways and the river, which seem to block the views. Will that change over time, or are the views there despite the trees?
So it's such an interesting question. And in our outreach, all these years ago now, back in 2018, some people really love those filtered views. Some people want more wide open views. There's a mix of opinion about it. So if you visit the site right now, there are no leaves on the trees. And so you can see right down to the river, and you can see how the water is interacting with the trees and everything, and, at the bases, and if the water's running high, what that looks like. And And we did have, so after we were all done with the project, we had to leave a lot of the trees because they are below the ordinary high water line, which we did not construct below. But we did do some post-construction sort of tree trimming and tree health pruning just to open up views a little bit more through the trees where they are. And then in the meantime, the special land use code that was developed for the riverfront really dictated that those views down the view corridors, down each of those streets, down 5th, down Wiley Griffin, and down Neck Neck Avenue, have these unobstructed views out to the river and into the sort of riparian forest across the river. So when you come out to those overlooks, the views are really expansive. So there's some of both. And I think that's important to sort of balance that urban riverfront park feel with conservation and also, shading the river, and then also providing really important views. So there's a balance there. We worked really hard to achieve it. And I think it can also really be appreciated, seasonally as well.
Great. Another question on trees. Will the existing trees be replaced with native trees as they age out?
Oh, yes, we have to. So any trees that we've planted on this site, that are on the riverside of the bike path at least. So we've planted big leaf maple, we've planted some alder. And yeah, if, as trees age out or die, yes, if we feel the need to replant, we definitely plant native because we'd be required to.
Okay, great. How are you planning to keep out the invasives and non-native plants?
Oh, yes. So, it's an interesting question, kind of in any of our park sites. We have like, what is it, like almost 6,000 acres of parks in Eugene, and 5,500 of them are in conservation areas, like not developed parks. So developed park areas are, kind of relatively small proportion. And so, yeah, it's a lot of work to keep and we can't cover every acre. I would say that this is one of the highest profile parks now in our city system. And because it will receive so much visitation, and we consider it such a destination, that it'll probably get a little bit sort of higher priority and just more regular maintenance and inputs than we might give other parks. And that's, like your neighborhood park and a lot of times, with some of these specialty gardens or specialty areas, we also have really dedicated volunteer groups. And so that may be something that arises out of the, development of this project. But, the Rose Garden has weekly work groups who really work to weed it and do all these really important things. Hendricks Park has really dedicated user groups. And I could see this project having that kind of volunteer interest. So either between staff time or volunteer time or other resources, I think it will end up looking, pretty good on a very regular basis.
Great. How was the soil amended prior to planting?
Oh, yes, that's a good question. So the existing soil that was there was really gravelly and sandy. And so the upside of that is that it's really well drained. So that's a solid thing. I think, drainage in Eugene and planting can be really challenging. So we had a couple different kinds of amending. So at the very north end of the site, we mostly just used soil that was there because it tested out well. It had good, we added a few sort of nutrients to it and tilled it all in, but we didn't add a lot of soil to it at the north end of the site. In the middle of the site, we definitely had to add loam and, basically a specialized soil mix that was really, kind of ideal for planting. And so we built everything to subgrade and then brought in, a good 12 inches or 18 inches of really nice planting soil. And it, so it had to meet the specification of all the right, basically all the right sieve types mixed with the right amount of organics and then, adequate nutrition, et cetera. So I think it was really specific. And we didn't till it in too much because there's so much, we tilled it in a little bit, but there's just a lot of rock out there. There's just a lot of bar run. So, and then we topped everything with, 3 inches of mulch. So trying to keep the moisture in and everything is looking really happy. It's really great. And then of course, every time we plant a plant, we, toss a little fertilizer in there with it. It's got some specific also planting requirements for nutrition long-term. So hopefully that answers the question.
I think so. Is there a limit to the height of the apartment buildings that will be built? The new buildings that are currently under construction on Franklin be directly from a Russian directive, no green and totally unattractive. Who is in charge of those decisions?
Right. Okay. So this is, this purely reflects your architectural taste, right? So, in this case, the new Riverfront District has a really specific set of design parameters. And so if you're an architect who's interested or a developer that's interested in building buildings on this site, you have to meet certain architectural standards. So, and they're a little more classic. So you'll probably see more brick and more, I don't know if you saw the illustration, but the buildings have a little more articulation. They have a little bit more detail. They're not quite as flat and they're not quite as tall. So there are also part of the design standards also are that the big buildings have to be lower, closer to the river, and then they can step back so that it doesn't you don't feel like you're back in this sort of corridor on the river where these really tall buildings meet right up against the park. Some of the buildings will take entrance off the park and plaza in the future. So I think those are 3 or 4 stories tall at the highest where it meets the park, and then it steps back from there. But I do not think it exceeds 7 stories in anywhere in the site. But don't quote me. And you could also look online to get some more of those sort of form-based code details. But again, I think the architecture will be definitely a little more interesting. And then also you can, several of these projects have applied for MUPD, which is, mixed use property tax exemption incentives. So that's an incentive and an investment method that the city can help, developers build buildings. People have different opinions about MUPD, but in any case, there's a big process for MUPD applications in which they have to show a lot of their architectural detailing. So if you go online and look up MUPD for City of Eugene, you should be able to see some of the elevations of these buildings and get more of an idea of kind of what the architecture looks like.
Okay. This is from Master Gardener. Would you be able to give a walking tour to the Master Gardeners before the park is open?
Ooh, I'm not sure. I'll have to talk to you all about it because I've given a lot of tours and I could probably fill all my days with tours. So I have to be a little bit selective, but it's not that I don't want to. It's just I have to kind of see what works. But I would definitely consider it. So someone just get a hold of me and we can figure that out.
Okay, great. What about parking?
Oh, parking. The endless question. So there's quite a bit of on-street parking, and all of the buildings will self-park, right? So, if you're getting an apartment building, if you live in this apartment building, you're going to park under it somehow, right? So on the sites themselves. But then there isn't, and also this is a funny thing. There's no parking code for parks unless I have a ball field and I have bleachers. And we're going to count how many people can sit in the bleachers and count how many cars they drive, then there's a parking requirement. Otherwise, there's no parking requirement for parks. So, we rely on on-street parking. If we have a community park, we often have parking lots, right? And so in this case, we are also, the steam plant is going to redevelop and they also need parking. And so we're in the process of purchasing. There's a site immediately south of the substation, which is just a concrete lot right now. And it's the former site of a manufactured gas power plant, which made a lot of toxins. So that site has been completely remediated under, basically the watchful eye of the DEQ locally, and it has to have a cap on it forever. So we're about to develop that as a parking lot for both the steam plant and park entrance down at the south end of the site. So we're hoping that a lot of people will bike and walk to the park. But I think, if we're having events there and it's a destination, yes, we need parking. So we are planning for that at the south end of the site.
Okay, great. Will there be a designated place for kayaks to pull out of the river for a park visit?
Yes, we have that. So in general, like the big main part of the park, we don't want people to access the river there, because if you go there right now, I don't know, maybe it's gone down a little bit, but they were letting a lot of water out of the dam, and it was rushing high. It was so scary. It's just not where you want to be. It's just not a safe side of the river. We want people to go on the river on the other side. But we do have some kayak tie-ups. And so on the main, so on the original EWEB Plaza, where the little fountain still is between the north and south buildings, if you climb down, if you sort of walk down to the river's edge there and you look off to your left, there's a little set of stone steps, and we have 3 kayak tie-ups there. They're painted brown, so they're subtle. They're blending in, but it's a secret spot. You can tie up your kayak, walk up, eventually have lunch on the river, and then hike on back down and climb back in. So that's the idea. So it's pretty subtle. Maybe we'll expand that in the future, but we did do that.
There's a question in the chat that says, will
Yes.
the park continue north towards Skinner's Butte into the large area abutting?
Yeah.
Proudfoot?
Yeah. So our work stops basically at south of the Ferry Street Bridge, but the bike path continues up into Skinner Butte Park, right? So yeah, it's right after that is Skinner Butte Park. So yes. And then she also asked, what does MUPT stand for? And again, I think it's Mixed Use Property Tax Exemption Program, or multi-use or something like that. So basically, if you have a building that has multiple uses in it, like housing and retail on the bottom, or, whatever, or offices, retail and housing, something like that, then you might qualify if you go through this extensive application process for deferring your property taxes on the project for a certain number of years. And eventually, that helps you finance your project, helps developers finance their project. And then it also, brings back big returns in the future, brings much bigger property tax infusions into our city system down the road. So it's an investment now for payback later. Sometimes people have a hard time thinking about that in 30-year cycles. But it is a developer incentive for us to get more property on our property tax rolls, since that's a primary source of funding for the city of Eugene.
Well, that looks like all the questions, quite a few actually.
Wow, lots of questions. Yeah.
That's a good question. Well, thanks so much, Emily. That was really great. That was a lot, very interesting. Can't wait to get down there after.
Oh, I can't wait for it to be open so everyone can come. I'm well beyond, done with it, but
I'm sure you are.
But it's a beautiful park. It's a wonderful experience. If you have more questions, you can always email me. And we'll keep working on it till it's all done. So I eagerly await the opening along with everybody else. So
thank you. In conclusion, I just want to remind everybody that our next seminar will be February 15th, when Neil Bell, a retired OSU horticulturist with Oregon State University Extension Service, will be presenting Shrub Pruning Made Easy, salvaging the overgrown and starting out right with new plantings. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks all.
Apologies for putting my questions in the chat after telling everybody else to put them in the Q&A. As a panelist, you don't have access to the Q&A.
I think I do.
Oh, well, I meant to actually put a question in.
Oh, really?
Oh, I see.
I think I could have answered them, but
I see.
I always have my own questions.
No problem. We
That
found it.
was wonderful.
Yeah, thanks. That really
Good. It's my pleasure. Of course.
I'm always driving over the bridge trying to sneak a look, and there's
Don't drive off